The autumn wind came down off the Sierra Nevada that Thursday afternoon, and it carried with it the kind of cold that only a man who has known too many funerals can recognize. It moved through the gravel lot of Modesto Memorial Gardens, lifted the brittle edges of the marigolds laid against a granite headstone, and curled around the boots of a man who had been kneeling there for the better part of an hour. The boots were black, scarred along the toe, and the leather of them had walked through places most people would never speak of. Roy Calhoun did not pray. He had not prayed since a road outside Kandahar in 2007, when prayer became a thing he could no longer trust. But he came to his mother's grave every Thursday, and he knelt, and he laid flowers, and he spoke in his head the way he could not speak with his mouth. She had been gone 10 years now. 10 years of Thursdays. 10 years of marigolds in the fall and white roses in the spring, and the slow erosion of grief into something quieter, something that lived behind the breastbone like a second heart. He could carry it now. He had learned how. What he had not learned how to carry was the second grave, the one that did not exist, the one he had built in his mind, the way some men build chapels brick by brick, year by year, until it stood as real to him as the granite his mother's name was carved into. That grave belonged to a girl named Hannah Marie Calhoun, born March 12, 2009. Lost not by death, but by the colder geometry of family court and a woman's ultimatum and a young man's stupid pride. Roy reached into the inside pocket of his vest. The vest was old. The leather had grown into the shape of his shoulders, the way bark grows into a fence. On the back of it was a winged skull, and beneath the skull, the patch of his charter, and beneath that, the rocker that named his territory, and on the front lapel was a small star that read Marine, and a smaller patch beneath it that simply said Brothers. He pulled out a folded envelope. Pink. He had bought a dozen pink envelopes 7 years ago when she was 8, and he had used one every March, and he had 3 left. The envelope was sealed. Inside it was a card with a horse on the front because she had loved horses when she was little, and inside the card he had written, "Happy 15th birthday, Peanut. Hope you got everything you wanted. I think about you every day. Love, Dad." He had tucked $50 behind the card. He always did. He did not know what she spent her money on now, or if her mother allowed her to spend it at all, or if the envelopes came back unopened the way they had every year for 7 years. The last one had come back with his ex-wife's handwriting on a sticky note. "Stop. She does not know you. Let her live." Diane had been 22 when he married her. He had been 24. He had been a sergeant by then, 2 tours done the Marine Corps already pressing him in shapes he did not yet know how to live with. Diane had been a cocktail waitress at a steakhouse outside Camp Pendleton. She had laughed at his jokes. She had wanted to be a nurse. She had cried the first time he came home from a deployment with a 1,000-yard stare and a temper that made him punch a wall in their kitchen at 3 in the morning. He had hated himself that night. He had promised her things. He had not kept all of them. When Hannah was born in 2009, Roy had been out of the Corps for 2 years, and he had been riding with the club for 1. The club had been the only place he had been able to breathe. The club had been the only place where the other men did not flinch when he stopped speaking for an entire evening. The club had been the only place where his silence had a meaning that someone else understood. Diane had not understood. Diane had wanted a husband who came home and watched television, and Roy had wanted a brotherhood that came home and rode through the night, and somewhere in the middle, somewhere in the long, quiet attrition of a marriage that had begun on a foundation. Neither of them had ever named Hannah, had grown from a baby into a girl, and the girl had begun to ask questions Diane had not wanted her to ask. The divorce had been ugly. The custody had been uglier. Diane's lawyer had been the kind of woman who knew how a leather vest looked to a judge, and Roy's lawyer had been the kind of man who told him plainly in a small office above a tire shop, "Either you take that thing off, or you lose her." Roy had not taken it off. He had told himself then that he would not let any court tell him who he was. He had told himself it was a matter of principle. He had been wrong. It had been pride. He understood that now. It had been pride dressed up as principle, and the price of it had been a child. Roy slid the envelope back into his vest. He would mail it tomorrow. He had given up expecting it to reach her. He mailed it anyway because some rituals are the only thing that keep a man pointed at the future. He stood. His knees cracked. 41 years old, and his knees sounded like a porch step in winter. He looked down at his mother's stone, at the marigolds, at the empty space beside her, where there was no one, and he said out loud this time in a voice rough with disuse, "I'll see you next week, Ma." The Harley waited for him in the lot. It was a 2003 Road King, blacked out, the chrome worn dull on the handlebars where his hands had gripped them through 200,000 miles. The bike was the one thing in his life that had never asked anything of him except gas oil and attention. He swung a leg over it. The engine caught on the first turn the way it always did, and the sound of it filled the quiet of the cemetery the way a hymn fills a church. 15 minutes to Ruby's Diner. He had ridden that route so many times he could have ridden it blind. Down Coffee Road, left on Sylvan, right on McHenry, past the strip mall where the dollar store had once been a movie theater. The diner sat on a corner where two streets came together at an angle that made the building look like the prow of a ship. Pale yellow stucco. A red neon sign that read, "Ruby's" in cursive, the U burned out for as long as Roy had been coming there. Inside, the smell of coffee that had been on the burner too long, of bacon grease, in the fryer of vinyl booth seats, warmed by an afternoon sun coming through the west-facing windows. Linda was working. She had been working at Ruby's for 19 years. She had hair the color of a struck match and a way of carrying coffee that suggested she had carried much worse things for much longer. She nodded at Roy when he came in. She did not say hello. She had stopped saying hello 3 years ago when she had figured out that Thursdays were not days he wanted to be greeted. Roy took his booth. Back to the wall. It was a Marine habit 15 years out of the Corps, and he still could not sit with his back to a door. Linda brought him black coffee without asking. He ordered the meatloaf special. She wrote nothing down. She knew. He looked out the window at the parking lot. A gray Toyota Corolla pulled in, and he registered it the way he registered every vehicle that came near him. Late 90s primer on the right front fender plates from Stanislaus County. A woman climbed out of the driver's side, mid-30s. Brown hair pulled back hard the way a woman pulls her hair when she does not want to be seen. She opened the back door and lifted out a child. A little girl, 7, maybe 8. Pink rain jacket, the hood up, even though the sun was out and the sky was clear. The mother held the girl's hand so tightly that Roy could see the white of her knuckles from across the lot. He watched them come in. He did not look at them. He looked past them, through them, the way a sniper learns to look at a tree line. But he saw them. He saw the way the mother's eyes went to the window every 6 seconds, a count he could not stop himself from making. He saw the way the girl's shoulders rode up around her ears. He saw the way they took the booth nearest the back exit, not the front. He had seen people sit like that before. In Kandahar. In a village where the men had gone and the women had stayed, and the women had taught their daughters to sit always near a door that opened into a place that was not the place they had come from. Linda took their order: pancakes, hot chocolate, extra whipped cream because the mother said it too brightly, the brightness of a person performing being okay. The girl did not speak. She nodded. Roy's meatloaf came. He cut it into squares the way his father had taught him to cut his meat the summer before his father died. His father had been 43. A semi-truck had crossed the center line on Highway 99, and Roy had been 14, and his mother had not been the same after, and Roy had joined the Marines the week he turned 18, because there was nothing left in Modesto to hold him. He thought about that sometimes, about how a single moment a man behind a wheel falling asleep could rewrite an entire life. He thought about it now, chewing meatloaf. He could not taste watching a woman in the back booth check her phone for the 11th time in 3 minutes. The bell over the door chimed. Roy did not look up. The bell chimed often. It was a diner. But the mother in the back booth stood. Her chair scraped the linoleum. The girl made a sound. A small sound. A sound that was not quite a word, but Roy heard it the way you hear a deer crack a branch in the woods at dusk. He looked up. The man who had come in was big. Not as big as Roy, but bigger than most. 6 feet 215, the build of a man who had once been athletic and had let it go to seed. He wore khakis and a navy windbreaker with no logo. His hair was buzzed short on the sides, longer on top, the haircut of a cop. Roy knew cops. He knew the haircut. He knew the walk. He knew the way the eyes moved through a room cataloging exits, weapons threats. But this man was not a cop anymore. Roy could not have said how he knew. He just knew. There was a tightness in the jaw, a way the man held his hands that said, "I used to have a badge, and I do not have one now, and the absence of it is the worst thing that has ever happened to me." The man's eyes found the woman in the back booth. His face did not change. That was the worst part. A man who is surprised, a man who is angry, his face moves. This man's face was the face of a hunter who has finally found the place his quarry has been hiding. The little girl saw him. She did not scream. She did not cry. She did something that Roy would remember for the rest of his life because he had seen Marines do it, and he had never seen a child do it before. She assessed. Her head turned slowly, taking in the room. The 2 truckers in the booth by the window arguing over a paper map. The elderly couple sharing a slice of pie. Linda behind the counter refilling the half-and-half pitcher, a teenage busboy carrying a tub of dirty dishes. And then the girl's eyes found Roy. She saw the leather vest. She saw the skull patch. She saw the gray in his beard and the scar that ran from his eyebrow into his hairline and the size of the hands wrapped around the coffee cup. She saw what most people saw when they looked at Roy Calhoun, which was a man you crossed the street to avoid. But she did not see only that, because her eyes moved after a half a second to the small star on his lapel, the patch that said Marine. And something happened in her face. Something settled, something decided. She slid out of the booth. Her mother was still standing, was reaching for her, but the girl was already moving. Across the diner, past the busboy, past Linda's outstretched hand. She came to Roy's booth like a soldier crossing open ground under fire. She climbed up onto the bench beside him. She grabbed the front of his vest with both small hands, and she balled the leather in her fists, and she looked up at him with eyes that were not the eyes of a child. "Please, sir," she said, "pretend you're my dad." Roy Calhoun had been told once by a Marine chaplain in a tent outside Helmand Province that there are moments in a man's life when God speaks to him directly, and that he will know those moments because they will not feel like miracles. They will feel like collisions. He felt the collision now. 7 words, the whole architecture of his last 7 years, the empty Thursdays, the pink envelopes, the second grave that did not exist, the daughter he had failed, and the mother he had buried, and the father he had lost, all of it folded down and compressed and slammed against his chest by 7 words from a stranger child. He did not think. Thinking would have ruined it. He moved. His arm came up and went around her small shoulders. He pulled her in against him, against the side of his vest, where the leather smelled like road dust and engine oil and the faint clove of the cigarettes he had quit a decade ago. He angled his body so that his bulk was between her and the door. He smiled, and the smile must have looked strange on his face because Linda froze behind the counter with the coffee pot in her hand. "Hey, Peanut," he said. His voice came out warm. He did not know where it came from. He had not used a voice like that in 7 years. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic on McHenry was a mess." The little girl pressed her face into his vest. He felt her trembling. He felt the small bones of her shoulders shaking against his palm. He felt against his ribs the rapid bird beat of her heart. The mother had reached them now. She was a smart woman. Roy saw it in her eyes in the half-second she took to read his face, his posture, the way her daughter had molded against him. She made the decision in less time than it takes most people to choose a sandwich. She slid into the booth across from him as though she had been planning to all along. She said in a voice that almost did not shake, "Sorry I started ordering without you, honey." "It's all right," Roy said. "I'm here now." The man at the door had crossed half the diner. He stopped at their booth. His eyes were on the woman, on the girl, on Roy, on the girl again. He did not look at the room. He did not check his exits. That was the thing that told Roy more than anything else what kind of man this was. A cop who is still a cop, even a bad one, checks his exits. This man had stopped checking. This man had decided that the rules no longer applied to him. "Megan," the man said. His voice was quiet. That was worse than yelling. "What is this?" The woman Megan did not answer. She picked up her water glass. Her hand was shaking so badly that the ice clinked. "Who is this man, Megan?" "Friend of the family," Roy said. He kept his voice low. He kept his arm around the little girl. He looked the man in the eye, and he made his face into the face he had used in Kandahar at checkpoints when a vehicle did not stop the way it was supposed to. It was not a hostile face. It was a face that said, "I am willing to go further than you are." The man's jaw worked. He said, "That's my daughter you've got your hands on." Roy felt the little girl flinch. He felt her hand find his and grip it under the table. Her fingers were cold. "Don't let him take us," she whispered. He felt the words against his ribs more than he heard them. "My name is Roy Calhoun," Roy said. He said it slowly because he wanted the man to hear every syllable. He wanted there to be no confusion later in any room, in any court, in any conversation about who he was and what he had said. "I'm having lunch with these ladies. They've asked me to, and I've agreed. You're standing too close to our table and you're upsetting the child. I'd like you to take a step back." The man did not take a step back. He smiled. It was a thin smile, the smile of a man who has been told no a great many times in the last few years and is no longer impressed by it. "You don't know who I am," the man said. "I don't need to," Roy said. "I just need you to step back. My name is Derek Brennan. I'm a deputy with the Stanislaus County Sheriff's Department." The lie came out smooth. So smooth, Roy almost believed it. He had seen men lie like that in the Marines, and he had learned that the smoothest liars are the ones who used to tell the truth for a living and have had to learn the other skill out of necessity. That's so, Roy said. That's so. So when I tell you that the woman across from you is mentally unstable and that she has been keeping my daughter from me in violation of our custody arrangement, what I am telling you is the official position of the state of California. Megan's mouth opened, closed, opened again. She said, "Derek, there is a restraining order. You are not supposed to be within 100 yards of us." "There was a restraining order," Derek said without looking at her. "It was reviewed last Tuesday and modified. You don't know that because you've been avoiding the email from my attorney for a week." "That's not true, Megan." He still did not look at her. He was looking at Roy. "We're going home now." Roy felt the little girl's fingers tighten around his. He felt his own heart doing the thing it had done in Kandahar, the slow descent into the cold place. He had learned a long time ago that anger is for amateurs. What you want when a situation goes sideways is not anger, it is stillness. The stillness of a man who has decided he will do whatever the next 60 seconds require him to do, and who has accepted in advance the price. Under the table, his left hand was already moving. He had 2 phones. He always had 2 phones. One was for the world, and one was for the club. He thumbed the club phone awake, blind by feel. He found the group thread. He typed 5 words. Rubies. Need bodies. Right now. He hit send. Then he switched to the other phone. He scrolled to a contact he had saved a year ago after a Christmas toy drive in which a man named Officer Raymond Holloway had shaken his hand and said, "Calhoun, you ever need anything from this department, you call me direct, not the line." Roy pressed Ray's name. He brought the phone up to his ear, slow, casual, the way a man checks a missed call. He kept his eyes on Derek. "Hey," he said when Ray picked up. He kept his voice friendly. He kept it conversational. "Yeah, it's Calhoun. Listen, I'm at Ruby's, the one on Sylvan. I've got a situation. There's a man here who says he's a sheriff's deputy named Derek Brennan. He's at my table. He's making threats. The woman with me has or had a protective order against him. I've got the little girl, his daughter, in my arms, and she's terrified. I'd appreciate it if you'd come down." Derek Brennan's face changed for the first time. It was a small change, a tightening at the corner of the mouth, but it was the change Roy had been waiting for. It was the change of a man hearing a name he recognized and understanding that the room had just become a different room. "You're calling the cops," Derek said. "Good. Call the cops. Let them sort this out." "They're already on their way," Roy said. He set the phone down on the table screen up the call still live. He wanted Derek to know it was live. He wanted Ray to hear what came next. "Sir," Linda said. She had come up behind Derek. She had the coffee pot in her hand. She was 63 years old and 4 feet 11, and she held the coffee pot like a weapon. "I'm going to need you to step away from the table." "Ma'am," Derek said, "this is a family matter." "It's a Ruby's matter," Linda said. "Step back or I'm calling the police." "He already did," Derek said, jerking his chin at Roy. "Then step back." He stepped back. 1 step. It was not enough, but it was something. In the parking lot outside, Roy heard the first one. A low, rolling thunder deeper than the skies, the unmistakable percussion of a twin cam in second gear pulling into a lot. Then a second engine. A third. He saw Derek's eyes flick to the window. The first of them came in through the door. His name was Marcus Bull Donovan. He was the chapter president. He was 58 years old, gray in his beard, blue in his eyes, and he wore a cut that had been worn so many years it had become a kind of skin. Behind him came Tiny, 6'6" and 340 pounds, who was called Tiny for the obvious reasons. Then a man called Whip, then a man called Garrett, then a man called Pastor, because he had once been one, and the irony stuck. They did not say anything. They did not need to. They came into the diner the way a thunderstorm comes into a valley, and they spread out, and they stood, and the room around them got very small. Bull Donovan walked over to Roy's booth. He nodded at the little girl. He nodded at Megan. He looked at Derek Brennan, and he did not nod. "Roy," he said, "you all right?" "I'm all right," Roy said. "This gentleman was just leaving." Derek Brennan did the math. He was a man who had been a cop, and a cop knows how to count. He counted 5 bikers, 1 Marine, 1 woman, 1 child, 1 waitress, and a live phone line to a Modesto police officer. He counted the truckers who had stood up. He counted the elderly couple who had not. He counted his own hands, which were empty. He smiled. It was a different smile now. It was the smile of a man who has lost a hand and is folding the cards, but who wants you to know that he is folding only because the deck is rigged and not because he was beaten. "All right," he said. "All right. We'll do it your way." He pointed at Megan. He did not raise his hand. He just pointed 2 fingers the way a man marks a spot on a map. "I'll see you in court, both of us, tomorrow morning, and we're going to talk about the company you keep and the kind of men you let put their hands on our daughter." He turned. He walked to the door. He pushed it open. The bell chimed. Through the window, Roy watched him cross the parking lot. He watched him get into the gray Toyota. He watched him sit there for a moment, both hands on the wheel, his head down. Then he watched him pull out his phone and start typing. Roy picked up his phone from the table. "Ray," he said, "you still there?" "I'm still here," said Officer Holloway's voice. "I heard most of it. I'm 3 minutes out. Don't let him leave the lot." "He's leaving the lot," Roy said. He read the plate to Ray. He read it twice. The Toyota pulled out onto Sylvan and turned right, heading north. He just turned north on Sylvan. "Copy. We'll find him. Roy, the woman, the kid, stay with them until I get there." I wasn't planning on leaving. He set the phone down. He looked at Megan. She was crying without sound the way a woman cries when she has had to cry quietly for so many years that the sound has been drained out of it. She wiped her face with a napkin. The little girl had not let go of his vest. The little girl had not made a sound since she had whispered into his chest. "Hey," Roy said soft. He lowered his head. "Hey, Peanut, he's gone. He's not coming back in here. You can let go if you want." She did not let go. "What's your name?" he said. "Lily," she said. It was the first word out of her, and it came out muffled against the leather. "Lily, I'm Roy. That's a real pretty name." "I know it is." He laughed. He did not know he still knew how. Across the table, Megan made a sound that was halfway between a sob and a laugh, and she pressed both palms to her face. "Thank you," she said through her hands. "Oh God, thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Roy said. "He's not the kind of man who's done." "I know," she said. "I know he isn't. I know." Bull Donovan had come over. He took the seat next to Megan without asking. He sat down the way an old dog lies down in stages with grunts. He set his elbows on the table. "Ma'am," he said, "Bull Donovan, I'm the president of Roy's Club. Anything you need from us from this minute forward, you've got. You understand what I'm telling you?" "I understand," Megan said. "I'm asking, do you understand? Because what I'm telling you is not what I tell most people who walk in off the street. It is not a small thing I am offering. I am offering you the full attention of every man in this room and 20 more who are not here, and I am asking if you understand what that means." Megan looked at him. Her eyes were red, but they were steady now. She had stopped crying. "Yes," she said, "I understand." "Good," Bull said. He turned his head slowly, and he looked at Lily. "And you, young lady, you picked the right table." Lily's face was still pressed into Roy's vest, but she nodded just once against his ribs. The police arrived 4 minutes later. Ray Holloway came in first. He was a tall, dark-skinned man in his 40s, with the lean, slightly stooped build of a man who had been a high school basketball player and had never quite finished growing out of the apology for his height. He nodded at Bull. He nodded at Roy. He came to the booth. "Mrs. Brennan," he said, "I'm Officer Holloway. I'm going to need you to come down to the station with me. You're not in trouble. I just need a statement. And I'd like a statement from your daughter, too, if she's up to it." He looked at Roy. "And from you, Marine." "How'd you know I was a Marine?" Roy said. "You think I don't read a man's vest, Calhoun?" Ray smiled briefly. The smile vanished. "Listen, I'm going to be straight with you. The name Derek Brennan rang a bell. I made a call from the car on the way over." He glanced at Megan. "He's not a sheriff's deputy. He hasn't been a sheriff's deputy for 2.5 years. "I told him that," Megan said. Her voice was raw. "He was a Stanislaus deputy. He got let go in 2022. There was a use of force investigation. It didn't go to charges, but he was given the choice to resign, and he took it. Since then, he's been working as a private investigator. Sort of." Ray's mouth twisted. "What I mean by sort of is he still has friends in a couple of departments who do him favors he shouldn't be getting." "Like what?" Roy said. "Like running plates, like pulling addresses, like I would guess finding out where his ex-wife's car has been parking for the last week." Megan went pale. She looked down at the table. "Yeah," Ray said quietly. "That's what I figured. Ma'am, I need to ask you. Have you changed your phone, your car, your routines since the protective order was filed?" "I changed my phone," Megan said. "I haven't changed the car. I can't afford another car." "All right, that's all right. We'll work with that. The first thing we're going to do when we get to the station is run a check on who's been pulling your records. The second thing we're going to do is talk about somewhere safe for tonight." "They've got somewhere safe," Bull said. Ray looked at him. He looked at Roy. He looked back at Bull. "You vouching for that?" Ray said. "I am." "All right." Ray nodded. He looked at Lily, still pressed against Roy. He crouched down beside the booth so his eyes were level with hers. He had a soft voice when he wanted to. "Hey there, sweetheart. My name is Officer Ray. I'm a friend of Mr. Calhoun's. I'm gonna take care of you and your mom now. Is that okay?" Lily turned her head just enough to look at him. She studied him the way she had studied Roy. After a long moment, she nodded. "Good," Ray said. He stood. His knees popped. He looked at Roy and his mouth went tight again. "He'll be back, you know." "I know," Roy said. "He's not the kind of man who walks away from this." "I know." "Calhoun," Ray said, "I have to ask, why you? Why did she pick you?" Roy looked down at the small fingers gripping his vest. He thought about it. He thought about the way she had looked at the patch that said Marine. He thought about her father's haircut, the haircut of a cop, and how a child raised in fear learns very young to read men by their shapes. "I think," Roy said slowly, "that she was looking for someone her dad would be afraid of." Ray nodded. He looked at the leather vest, at the patches, at the gray in Roy's beard. "Well," he said, "she picked right." They left the diner together. Roy carried Lily out because she would not let go, and Megan walked beside him with her hand on his arm because she did not yet trust her own legs. The bikers fell in around them like a moving wall. In the parking lot, Tiny opened the passenger door of Ray's cruiser and helped Megan in, and Roy buckled Lily into the back seat with the gentleness of a man who had not buckled a child into a car in 7 years and had forgotten how heavy the silence of doing it could be. Before he closed the door, Lily reached up and tugged on his sleeve. "You'll come to the police station, right?" she said. "I'll be there," he said. "I'll follow right behind. You'll see my headlight in the mirror the whole way. Promise. On my mother's grave." She nodded, once satisfied. He closed the door. He stood in the parking lot of Ruby's diner and watched the cruiser pull out. He watched the brake lights flash at the stop sign. He watched it turn onto McHenry. He stood there for a long time with his hands in his pockets and the wind off the Sierras moving the dry leaves around his boots. Bull Donovan came and stood beside him. They did not speak for a while. "You know what you just did," Bull said finally. "I know what I just did. That little girl, she isn't going to let you put her down. I know it. And the ex-husband, he's going to come for you now, not just for them, for you. You understand what I'm saying?" "I understand." Bull nodded slowly. He looked off across the parking lot at the red neon rubies sign with the burned-out U. "Roy," he said, "how long since you talked about Hannah?" Roy did not answer for a moment. The name hung between them in the cold air. 7 years, he said. "You ever think," Bull said, "that maybe the reason that little girl walked across the room to you and not to anybody else in there was that something inside her could feel something inside you, something that was already pointed in her direction?" "I don't believe in things like that," Roy said. "Nobody believes in things like that until they happen to them." Roy did not answer. The wind moved his beard. He thought about the pink envelope in his vest. He thought about his father and his mother, and the second grave that did not exist, and the small fingers that had gripped his leather like a drowning swimmer grips a rope. "Bull," he said, "I need a favor." "Name it." "I need somebody to drive my bike back to the house. I'm going to ride to the station with the boys. I don't want to lose sight of that cruiser." Bull smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. "Already done, brother," he said. They mounted up. 6 engines fired in the parking lot of Ruby's Diner, and the sound of them rolled out across Sylvan Avenue and down toward the police station, and somewhere ahead of them, in the back seat of a Modesto police cruiser, a 7-year-old girl named Lily Brennan looked out the rear window and counted 6 headlights and started for the first time that afternoon to cry. She cried because she was safe. She did not yet have the words to explain the difference. At the station, they were taken into separate rooms. Megan went with a detective named Coleman who specialized in domestic violence. Lily was placed in a child-friendly interview room with a social worker named Jeanette, who had soft eyes and a stuffed rabbit on the desk. Roy was put in an interrogation room, the regular kind with the metal table and the camera in the corner, and he sat there for an hour and a half without complaint because he understood why they were doing it. He had been on the other side of tables like this in his life, in places that were not California, and he knew that the men who got nervous in interrogation rooms were the men who had something to hide. He had nothing to hide. He sat with his hands folded on the table and he waited. Ray Holloway came in eventually with 2 coffees and paper cups. He set one down in front of Roy. He sat down across from him. "All right, Marine," Ray said. "Tell me how it went down. Start from when you walked in the diner." Roy told him. He told it straight the way he had been taught to write incident reports in the Corps. Time of arrival, booth selection, order placed. Notice of the woman and child entering. Notice of their behavior, specifically the placement of the booth near the rear exit, the mother's repeated checking of the parking lot, the child's pink rain jacket on a sunny day. Notice of the gray Toyota Corolla, the plate number which he had memorized at first sight without thinking about it. Notice of the man who entered, the man's haircut, the man's walk, the little girl's approach to his booth. Ray took notes. He stopped writing when Roy got to the part about the 7 words. "She said what?" "She said, 'Please, sir, pretend you're my dad.'" Ray's pen rested on the page. He looked at Roy for a long moment over the rim of his coffee. "All right," he said. "That's going in the report exactly that way." "What's going to happen to her?" Roy said. "To the kid, she and her mom are going to be put into the system tonight. There's a shelter we use. It's secure. The location isn't public." Bull offered them somewhere. "I know he did. And I'm going to be honest with you, Marine, that's a conversation I'm going to have with my lieutenant, Because the answer to whether a Hells Angels charter house counts as a safe environment for a 7-year-old girl is not a simple answer in this department. It's a safe environment. I know it is. I know you know it is. I'm telling you what the conversation is going to look like. Roy nodded. He drank his coffee. It was bad coffee, but he had drunk worse. Ray, he said. Brennan. Yeah. Tell me about him. Ray closed his notebook. He sat back. I shouldn't tell you anything. I know you shouldn't. Ray looked at the ceiling. He looked at the camera in the corner. He looked back at Roy. Off the record. Off the record. He was a bad cop. He wasn't the worst kind of bad cop. He wasn't planting evidence or shaking down dealers. He was the kind of bad cop who liked the uniform too much. You know what I mean. I know what you mean. The use of force investigation was a domestic call, not his own, somebody else's. He showed up and the husband mouthed off and Brennan took it personally. He put the man's face through a screen door. He hit her too, Megan. Probably. Probably for years before anybody knew. But none of that was on paper until last year when she finally got the order. The thing you have to understand about Derek Brennan, Marine, is that he is a man who used to have a job that told him he was important, and he doesn't have it anymore. And what he has instead is a list of people who used to obey him and don't have to obey him anymore. And that list in his head is the same as the list of people who have wronged him. So he's going to come. He's going to come. He's been coming for a year. He's going to keep coming until somebody stops him. Roy nodded. He drank his coffee. He thought about the small fingers gripping his vest. He thought about a 15-year-old girl in Oregon he had not seen since she was 8. All right, he said. All right, what? All right, I'll stop him. Ray looked at him for a long time. Calhoun, Ray said, I'm going to need you to be careful with that sentence. I'm going to need you to remember that I am a police officer, and you are a man with a long file in this department. My file is clean. Your file is clean. The file of the organization you ride with is not clean. And the line between what I can let happen and what I have to act on is a line I have to walk every day, and I do not want to walk it across your face. You understand me. I understand you. What you do, Roy, you do legal. You do it through me. You call me. You call the lieutenant. You don't go looking for him. You let him come to you, and when he comes, you make sure there are witnesses and cameras and a record. Are we clear? We're clear. Ray nodded. He stood. He picked up his coffee cup and he started for the door. He stopped with his hand on the knob. For what it's worth, he said, what you did in that diner. I've been a cop 22 years. I've seen a lot of men in a lot of rooms. Most of them, when a little girl runs up and grabs them and asks for help, they freeze, or they push her off, or they hand her to somebody else. He looked back at Roy. You're not most men. I had a daughter once, Roy said. Ray's face did something he did not let it do, just for a second. Once, he said. It's a long story. Yeah, Ray said. It usually is. He went out. The door closed behind him. Roy sat in the metal chair for a long time before they came back to release him. He thought about his father. He thought about the summer day in 1997 when his father had taught him how to cut his meat into squares, and how 3 weeks later a semi-truck had come over a yellow line on Highway 99 and ended that man's life and rewritten Roy's. He thought about how a single moment, a man behind a wheel, could decide everything. He thought about how a 7-year-old girl crossing a diner floor was also a single moment. He thought about how moments like that in his experience were not endings. They were starts. In the lead headlight, Roy Calhoun rode with his jaw set and his eyes on the cruiser's taillights, and he did not know it yet, but the second grave he had built in his mind for 7 years was beginning brick by brick to come down. By the time they reached the station somewhere in a small house outside of Bend, Oregon, a 15-year-old girl named Hannah Calhoun was opening her laptop because a friend had texted her a link, and the link was to a local news story out of Modesto, California, and the headline read, "Biker Saves Mother and Child from Estranged Husband in Diner Standoff." And in the photograph at the top of the article taken by a passerby through the diner window was a man with a gray beard and a leather vest, and his arm was around a little girl in a pink rain jacket, and Hannah Calhoun looked at the man's face for a long time, and then she looked at the small star on his lapel that said Marine, and she did something she had not done in 7 years. She had seen pictures of him before. Not many. There were two she remembered. One was a wedding photograph in a drawer her mother thought she did not know about. The man in it had been clean-shaven and 24 years old and had been holding her mother's hand and looking at the camera the way a man looks at a camera when he does not yet know what is coming. The other photograph had been in a shoebox in the garage. It had been Roy in his dress blues, his Marine uniform taken at his promotion to sergeant, and on the back of it, her mother had written in pencil, in a handwriting that looked nothing like the handwriting her mother used, "Now my husband, the man I love." Hannah Calhoun was a quiet girl. Her teachers said it on every report card. She was quiet and she was smart, and she had been seeing a counselor at school since the 7th grade for what the counselor called persistent low mood, and what Hannah alone in her room called the gray. The gray had a shape, and the shape was the shape of a father who had not wanted her. She had been told that this was the truth. She had been told it gently and consistently, and from the time she was old enough to understand the sentence. She looked at the photograph on the news website. She looked at the man's arm around the little girl. She looked at his face. She thought about the gray. She thought about the 7 birthdays she had spent telling herself a story that her mother had told her, and she thought for the first time in her life with a clarity that came over her like a window opening. I do not know if any of this is true. She went up into the attic. She moved a box of Christmas ornaments. She lifted the loose floorboard her mother thought she did not know about, and she pulled out a wooden cigar box, and she opened it, and inside it were 7 pink envelopes, each one unopened, each one addressed to her in a handwriting she had not seen since she was 8 years old. Hannah Calhoun sat down on the attic floor in the dust and the cold, and she picked up the oldest envelope, the one postmarked March of 2018, and she began very carefully to open it. The card inside had a horse on the front. She read what was written inside. She read it twice. She picked up the next envelope. She opened it. She read it. She opened all 7. By the time she got to the most recent one, the one postmarked 3 weeks ago, the one with the words, "Happy 15th Birthday, Peanut," written in a slanted block print that did not match the cursive on the envelope, but that matched exactly the small, careful letters on the back of the photograph in the garage. Hannah Calhoun was sitting in the attic of her mother's house in Bend, Oregon, with her knees pulled up to her chest and tears running down her face, and she was making a decision that would change the rest of her life. She picked up her phone. She typed into the search bar, Roy Calhoun, Modesto, California. She hit search. She scrolled past the news article, past the photograph, past the comments. She found a phone number for a motorcycle repair shop on the south side of Modesto. The business was called Calhoun Custom Cycle. She did not call it yet. She put the phone down. She sat in the attic for a long time and looked at the 7 open envelopes spread out on the floor in front of her, and the 7 cards and the $350 and $50 bills, and the 7 separate handwritten paragraphs that all said in slightly different words the same thing. "I think about you every day." Below her in the kitchen, she could hear her mother making dinner. She could hear the radio playing the news, and she could hear faintly the words Modesto, and biker and altercation. Hannah Calhoun put the cards back in the envelopes. She put the envelopes back in the cigar box. She put the cigar box back under the floorboard. But she kept one. The most recent one. She folded it once and put it in the inside pocket of her hoodie against her chest, where it lay over her heart, the way her father's pink envelope 400 miles to the south lay over his. She went down out of the attic. She closed the hatch behind her. She washed her face in the bathroom. She came down the stairs to dinner, and she sat across from her mother, and she ate what was on her plate, and she said nothing about anything. But that night in her room with the door closed and the lamp turned low, she opened her laptop, and she did not call the number she had found. Not yet. She was not ready. But she opened a new browser tab, and she typed in the address of the news article, and she clicked on the photograph, and she made it her screensaver. The face of a stranger with a gray beard looking down at a little girl in a pink rain jacket with his arm around her shoulders like he would die before he let her go. Hannah Calhoun turned off her lamp. She lay in the dark, and for the first time in 7 years, she did not feel the gray. 400 miles south, in a city she had never been to, the night was not yet finished with the man whose photograph she had set as her screen. They put Megan and Lily in a women's shelter on the east side of Modesto that night. It was a building without a sign on it. The address was not in any directory. The windows were the kind of windows that opened only 6 inches, and the door was a steel door with a peephole and a buzzer and a camera that the residents could check before they unlocked anything. Roy walked them in. He stood in the lobby with Bull beside him and a counselor named Caroline Webb on the other side of the bulletproof glass, and he watched a 7-year-old girl be told that this was where she would sleep tonight. Lily would not let go of his hand. "Just one night," Roy said. He was crouched down his knees against the tile floor. "Just tonight, and then we'll figure out what's next." "Okay. You promised you'd stay with me," Lily said. "I promised I'd be at the station with you. I was. I am keeping that promise. You promised on your mother's grave, and my mother's grave is still there, Peanut. So is my promise. But I can't sleep in this building. The rules of this building say so. The reason for the rules is to keep you safe. Do you understand?" She looked at him. Her eyes were huge. He had not really looked at her eyes yet in the chaos of the day. They were a strange pale green, the color of a creek bottom seen through clean water. "You won't go where I can't find you," she said. "I'll be at the same number on the same phone every minute of every day. Your mom has it. The lady behind that window has it. Officer Ray has it. Bull has it. The whole world has it." He smiled. He did not know he could still smile like that. "You won't lose me, Peanut. Not anymore." She nodded slowly. She let go of his hand. She walked over to her mother. Megan put a hand on top of her head, and the two of them disappeared through a door that locked behind them, and Roy stayed in the lobby for a moment longer than was necessary, looking at the door before he turned and walked out into the cold parking lot with Bull at his shoulder. "You said any more," Bull said. "I did. You said you won't lose me, not anymore." "I know what I said. That's a hell of a thing to say to a child, Roy." "I know it is." They walked to the bikes. The street lights had come on. The sodium lamps painted the asphalt orange and made the chrome of the Harleys look like burned brass. "You know what tomorrow looks like," Bull said. "I know what tomorrow looks like. He's going to try something, Brennan. He's going to try something. You ready for it?" Roy stopped at his bike. He laid his hand on the cold tank. He felt the curve of it the way you feel a horse's neck. "No," he said, "but I'll be ready by morning." He rode home to a house he did not love. It was a small ranch, single-story, built in 1968 on a quiet street 5 blocks from the river. He had bought it the year after the divorce because it was cheap and because the garage was large enough to hold 3 bikes. He had lived in it for 6 years without putting a picture on a wall. He had a couch and a bed and a kitchen with 2 coffee mugs in it, and the rest of the house was the rest of the house, and he had been comfortable in it precisely because it had asked nothing of him. He walked through it that night, and he saw it for the first time as a stranger might see it. The empty rooms, the bare walls, the single chair at the kitchen table, the dust on the 2nd bedroom door, which he had not opened in 2 years because the 2nd bedroom had a twin bed in it that he had bought at some point in a moment he could no longer remember, and the bed had a quilt on it that he had also bought, and he had bought these things. He understood now the way a man dying of thirst buys glasses without water. He stood in the hallway in front of the 2nd bedroom for a long time. Then he opened the door. He turned on the light. He looked at the bed, the quilt, the dust. He shut the door. He did not sleep that night. He sat in his garage with a beer he did not drink, and he polished the chrome on the Road King until it could not be polished any more, and somewhere around 3 in the morning, his club phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a text from Bull. 2 words. Brennan posted. Roy opened the link Bull had attached. It went to a Facebook page that did not have a real name on it, but that Bull had recognized by the profile picture, a photograph of a deer he had killed in 2019 that he had used as his profile picture for 5 years. The post was 37 minutes old. It had been written, Roy could see by a man who had been drinking the way men who have been cops write when they are drinking, with the sentence structure of a report and the spelling of a man whose autocorrect is going to bed before he is. The post said, Today I tried to see my daughter and was attacked at a public restaurant by a group of armed Hell's Angels. The biker who put his hands on my child is named Roy Calhoun. He has a long criminal history that the local PD refuses to investigate due to corruption. The truth will come out. There are people in this town who know me and know what kind of man I am. If you have information about Calhoun, his associates, or his place of business, please message me. The system has failed my family. The system will not protect my daughter. I will. Roy read it 3 times. Then he forwarded it to Ray Holloway. He did not put a message with it. He did not need to. Ray did not respond until 6 in the morning. The response was 4 words. Lawyer up. I'll call. Roy got a lawyer. His name was Frank Mullen. Frank was 62 years old, 300 pounds, an Irishman, with a beard the color of cold iron, and an office above a barber shop on H Street. Frank had been representing the club for 30 years. Frank had a way of looking at a man over his glasses that suggested he had heard every excuse a human being could make and had decided not to be impressed by any of them. Roy went to Frank's office at 9 in the morning. Frank read the post. Frank made some calls. Frank said, Here's where we are. The post is not actionable until he names you in a way that crosses into defamation. He's close. He's not there. The phrase long criminal history is dangerous because you don't have one, and we can document that. The phrase put his hands on my child is also dangerous because there are 8 witnesses and a phone recording that say you did not. So we wait. We document. We don't engage. What does he do next? Roy said. He escalates. Men like this always escalate. Right now, he's looking for an audience. He'll find one. He'll find 5 guys on the internet who agree with him, and he'll let them work themselves up, and one of them will do something stupid on his behalf, and he'll deny he asked them to. The real risk is not him. The real risk is whoever he can get to act for him. What do? We make a wall. We get the protective order extended. We get a no-contact order against him for you. We talked to the DA about violation of the order yesterday. The diner has cameras. Get me the footage. Get me Linda's statement. Get me a statement from every biker who is in that room. We build a paper trail so high that when he does something, it's the easiest charge any prosecutor has ever seen. All right, Roy. Frank took off his glasses. He polished them on the tail of his shirt. He put them back on. There's something else I have to ask you. All right, this little girl, you're going to want to be in her life. Maybe. Don't lie to me, Marine, I haven't got time. You're going to want to be in her life. I can hear it in the way you talked about her for the last 10 minutes. The question is whether her mother wants you in her life. Because if she does, and there is anything between the two of you, anything that someone could point at and call inappropriate, this whole thing turns into a different kind of case, and the kid loses you. Are you hearing me? I'm hearing you. So whatever you feel, you keep it to yourself. You are an uncle. You are a family friend. You are a Marine who answered a call. You are not anything else. Not for a long time. Understood. Now go home. Sleep. You look like a man who hasn't slept. Roy did not go home. He went to the body shop he owned, Calhoun Custom Cycle, on the south side of town. He had owned it for 9 years. He had 3 employees. He had a pit bull named Maggie, who slept on a piece of carpet behind the front counter. He had a phone on the wall that rang sometimes and not others. It rang at 10:37 in the morning. The voice on the other end was a young voice female, careful. Hi, it said. I'm trying to reach Roy Calhoun. You've got him. There was a long pause, long enough that Roy thought the line had dropped. Then the voice came back. It was a different voice now. It was a voice that was trying very hard not to shake. Dad, it said, it's Hannah. Roy Calhoun sat down. He did not know he was sitting down until he was. The chair behind him caught him. He set the phone down on the counter very slowly, and he picked it back up, very slowly, and he held it against his ear, and he said in a voice that came from somewhere he had not used in 7 years, Hannah. Yeah, she said, it's me. Hi. Hi. Neither of them said anything for a while. Roy could hear her breathing. He could hear faintly a school bell somewhere on her end of the line. I saw the news, Hannah said, about the little girl in the diner. Yeah, I read your cards. He closed his eyes. He pressed his palm flat against the counter, against the wood, against the dust of the wood, against the years of grease that had soaked into the grain of it. All of them, she said, all 7. All right, he said. He could hear how his voice was shaking. He did not care anymore who heard it. All right, Peanut. All right. Mom doesn't know I'm calling. All right. I don't want to get in trouble. You won't get in trouble. Not from me, not for this, not ever. Dad. Her voice broke on the word. He heard her swallow. He heard her gather. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't know. Hannah. He was crying now. He did not bother to hide it. Hannah, you have nothing to be sorry for. Do you hear me? Nothing. Mom said you didn't want me. Mom was wrong. The line went very quiet. He could hear her breathing change. Why didn't you come? He had known she would ask. He had thought about how he would answer it for 7 years in the long Thursday rides home from the cemetery. He had practiced the sentence. He had abandoned the sentence. He had rebuilt it. He had thrown it away. Now sitting at the counter of his motorcycle shop with his pit bull asleep on her piece of carpet and the smell of 2-stroke oil in the air, he did not say any of the things he had practiced. He said, I should have. I tried in the ways I knew. They weren't enough. I'm sorry, Hannah. I have been sorry every day. She cried then. He let her cry. He did not fill it with words. He sat in the silence with her 400 miles away, and he held the phone with both hands like a thing he was afraid of dropping. When she could speak again, she said, Can I come see you? Yes. When? Whenever you want. Tonight? Tomorrow? Whenever you can. I will come get you. I will fly. I will ride. Whatever you need. I can't yet. I need to talk to Mom. Then talk to Mom. And whatever you decide, I am here. I am right here. I am not going anywhere. Do you understand me, Hannah? I am not going anywhere ever again. Okay. Okay. Dad, the little girl, Lily, is she safe? She's safe. I want to meet her. You will. Okay. Hannah, can I call you? Can I have this number? Yes. Then I'm going to call you tonight, after school, 6 o'clock your time. Is that all right? Yes. Okay. Okay. Peanut. Yeah. I love you. I have loved you every day. I just want you to know that. You don't have to say anything back. I just want you to know that I have never stopped. She was crying again. He waited. Bye, Dad, she said finally. Bye, Peanut. She hung up. He set the phone down on the counter. He sat in the chair for a long time. Maggie the pit bull came over and put her head on his knee. She had never done that before in 9 years. All right, girl, he said. He laid his hand on her head. All right. He called her at 6 that evening. He called her every evening for the next 11 days. He did not tell Diane. He had asked Hannah whether he should, and she had asked him not to yet. And he had honored her request because she was 15 years old, and the decision to rebuild a relationship with a father her mother had told her did not love her was a decision she needed to be allowed to make in her own time. The calls were short at first. 10 minutes, 15. They were the awkward, careful conversations of two people who shared a great deal of biology and almost no history. He learned that she was a junior at a high school in Bend. He learned that she was good at math and hated PE. He learned that she had a part-time job at a coffee shop on weekends and that her best friend was a girl named Sarah, whose family raised goats. He learned that she had wanted to be a veterinarian until last year, when her counselor had asked her what she actually wanted to be, and she had said almost without thinking, a lawyer who helps kids. The third call she had asked him about Lily. She had asked him to describe her. He had told her about the pink rain jacket, about the pale green eyes, about the way she had walked across the diner like a soldier crossing open ground. Hannah had listened. At the end, she had said very quietly, "She sounds brave." "She is." "Dad?" "Yeah, I want to be brave like that." "Peanut, you called me, after 7 years, with no idea who I was, with your mother in the kitchen below you. That is the bravest thing I have ever heard of anyone doing." She had not answered for a while. Then she had said, "Tell me about your mother, my grandmother." He had told her. He had told her about a woman named Marlene Calhoun, who had grown up on a peach farm outside of Manteca, who had married his father out of high school, who had been widowed at 33, who had raised her son in a 2-bedroom house on a quiet street, who had baked pies on Sundays, even after the cancer had come into her bones, who had asked on the last afternoon of her life to be wheeled out to the porch one more time to feel the sun. He had told her about the marigolds. He had told her about Thursdays. Hannah had cried. He had let her cry. "I would have liked her," Hannah had said. "She would have loved you, Peanut. She did love you. She kept a picture of you on her dresser until the day she died. She used to talk to it. She used to tell it about her week." "You never told me that." "I didn't know how to tell you anything, Hannah. I was a coward. I'm sorry." "Stop saying you're sorry. All right? Just be here. Be here from now on. That's enough." In the meantime, Roy and Bull and Frank Mullen built the wall. The diner footage came in. Linda gave a statement that was a small masterpiece of Linda. Each of the bikers who had been in the room gave statements. Megan filed the paperwork to extend the order. Ray Holloway and his lieutenant agreed after some negotiation that the women's shelter was the appropriate place for Megan and Lily for the time being, but that the club could provide supplementary security in the form of regular drive-bys by men with no criminal records. Roy visited Lily at the shelter every afternoon. He had to be buzzed in. He had to sit in the lobby, never in the residential area. Lily would come to the bulletproof window and put her hand against it, and he would put his hand on the other side, and they would talk through the glass and the intercom about nothing at all and everything that mattered. The first afternoon, she had come down to the window in a borrowed sweatshirt 3 sizes too big. The sleeves had hung past her hands. She had looked in that lobby light smaller than she had looked in the diner, the way children always do when they are inside a place that was built for adults in trouble. He had brought her a coloring book from a drugstore on Yosemite Avenue, and a box of crayons, and a small stuffed bear with a leather vest sewn onto it by a woman in the club whose name was Maureen, and whose hands were the kind of hands that could fix anything that had ever been broken. He had passed these things through the slot under the window. He had watched Lily examine the bear with a seriousness that suggested she was making a decision about its character. "What's his name?" she had said. "You name him. He looks like a Henry." "Then he's a Henry." The second afternoon, she had asked him to tell her a story about something good that had happened to him. He had thought about it for a long time. Most of the good things he could think of were things he had thought were good at the time and had turned out in retrospect to have been mistakes. But he had told her about a morning in 2003 when he had been 20 years old and had been stationed at 29 Palms, and he had gotten up before dawn to walk in the desert because he had not been able to sleep, and a coyote had come out of a wash and had stood 20 feet from him and had looked at him without fear and had walked away. He had told her that he had stood in the desert at dawn, watching the coyote walk away, and had felt for the first time in his life that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Lily had listened to the whole story. When he had finished, she had said, "Did you ever feel like that again?" He had thought about it. "Yes," he had said, "yesterday in a diner with a little girl in a pink rain jacket." She had smiled. It had been the first smile he had seen from her since the moment her hand had touched his vest. On the 7th day, Lily said, "I want to see the motorcycle." "You will," Roy said. "When can I come out?" "That's up to your mom and Officer Ray." "I want to come live with you." Roy was quiet for a long time. He looked at her hand pressed against the glass. He thought about Frank Mullen's voice. "You are an uncle. You are a family friend." "Peanut," he said, "your home is with your mom, always. That's what a home is. But I am going to be here near you for as long as you want me to be. Is that okay?" "Yes." "Okay. Roy, are you my dad now?" His throat closed. He worked his jaw. He breathed. "I'm your friend Lily. I'm your friend who is going to keep you safe. We don't need to call it anything else." "Okay," she said, but she said it the way a child says a thing she does not entirely accept. On the 11th day of phone calls with Hannah, Frank Mullen called Roy at the shop. Frank's voice was different. Frank's voice was the voice it became when Frank was about to say something he did not want to say. "Roy," he said, "Brennan made bail this morning." Roy stopped moving. He had been wiping his hands on a shop rag. He set the rag down. "How?" "His lawyer is a man named Tom Vance. I've known Tom for 20 years. He's a piece of work, but he's good at what he does. He filed a motion arguing that the protective order was procedurally defective when it was modified last month, and that the warrant for yesterday's arrest is therefore in question. The judge bought it for purposes of bail. Brennan posted $25,000 and walked out at 9 this morning. Where is he now? That Roy is the question." Roy called Ray Holloway. Ray did not answer. Ray called back 11 minutes later. Ray's voice was tight. "Calhoun, I know." "Where is he?" "I don't know yet. He posted bail. His parents' house listed address no one home the cruiser drove by. His ex-mother-in-law has not heard from him. The bar he used to drink at, no one's seen him. He's a man with cop training and contacts Roy. If he doesn't want to be found, he won't be found. What about Megan and Lily? They stay in the shelter. We've upgraded the patrols. The address is not in any database he could legally access. The question is whether somebody is helping him illegally access it. You think somebody is? There was a pause. Roy, I'm going to tell you something I shouldn't. There's an officer in the Stanislaus Sheriff's Department who used to be Brennan's partner. His name is Travis Carmody. He's been pulled in twice in the last year for running plates that shouldn't have been run. He's still on the job. He shouldn't be. Tell me where to find him. Roy, stop. I'm telling you this so you understand the picture. I am not telling you so you can do something. Tell me where to find him. Roy. All right. Roy made himself breathe. He made himself think. He thought about Frank Mullen. He thought about the wall they had built. He thought about a 15-year-old girl in Oregon who he was supposed to call at 6 o'clock that evening. All right. I'm not going to find him. Tell me what you're going to do. I'm going to put a man on him, unofficially. A retired investigator we use. He'll watch him. If he goes near the shelter, if he goes near you, if he goes near anywhere he shouldn't be, we'll know. Thank you. Roy, there's something else. What? Your daughter in Oregon. Roy went still. He had not told Ray. He had not told anyone except Bull. He had not told anyone Hannah's name or what state she was in. How do you know about her? Because Brennan knows. I had a guy reading the comments on his Facebook post this morning. Somebody I don't know who yet posted information about you. They posted that you have a daughter in Oregon. They posted her first name. They posted her age. They posted the town. Roy felt the cold come over him. He had felt it before on a road in Helmand Province when he had heard a sound that was not the sound the truck ahead of him was supposed to be making. It was the same cold. How did they find her? I don't know yet. It would not be hard. She's listed in school directories. She has social media. It's not classified information. It's just information that nobody had bothered to look for. Has Brennan responded? He liked the post. Roy closed his eyes. All right, he said. All right. Roy, listen to me. There is a possibility, and right now, it's only a possibility that he is going to try to use her against you. As leverage. As a way to draw you away from Megan and Lily, or as a way to hurt you, or both. I'm not telling you to panic. I'm telling you the picture. I need to call Oregon. You need to call Oregon. I need to call her mother. You need to call her mother. Ray, Diane and I have not spoken in 7 years. Roy, the time for that to be a problem just ended. Roy hung up. He stood in his shop. Maggie was looking up at him. The clock on the wall said 3:47 in the afternoon. It was the same time almost to the minute that he had been sitting in Ruby's diner 12 days ago before a 7-year-old girl in a pink rain jacket had walked across the floor and changed his life. He picked up his phone. He scrolled through his contacts to a name he had not called in 7 years. The name was Diane. Underneath the name in the notes, he had written nothing. He pressed call. It rang 4 times. He thought it was going to go to voicemail. He was already composing the message in his head. Diane, it's Roy. Something has happened. Please call me back. Hannah is in danger. But she answered. Roy, her voice. He had forgotten what it sounded like. Or he had remembered what it sounded like wrong in the way you remember things you have not heard in a long time. It was not the voice he had been carrying in his head. It was thinner. It was older. It was a voice that had been disappointed in a great many things and had learned to live with them. Diane, he said, I knew you'd call. That was the first thing she said. Not hello, not why are you calling. I knew you'd call. You saw the news. I saw the news. I knew you'd call as soon as I saw the news. Diane, listen to me. Hannah called me. There was a long pause. When? 11 days ago. We've been talking on the phone every evening since. He heard her sit down. He heard a chair scrape across a kitchen floor 400 miles away. Roy, she said. Oh, Roy. I didn't tell her not to tell you. I asked her if I should. She asked me not to yet. She read the cards. She read the cards. There was a sound on the other end of the line. He understood after a moment that it was Diane crying. He had heard Diane cry before. This was not that sound. This was a sound he had not heard before from her or from anyone. It was the sound of a woman who had been carrying a small, dark thing in her chest for a great many years, and the thing had just turned out to be much bigger than she thought it was, and it was now in her throat. Diane, he said, I have to tell you something else, and I need you to focus on it because it is more important right now than anything else. Okay. There is a man in Modesto. His name is Derek Brennan. He is the father of the little girl in the news. He is dangerous and he has friends in the local sheriff's department and he has just made bail. And he is, we believe, looking for ways to hurt me. And he has found out today that Hannah exists and that she lives in Oregon and approximately where. The line went silent. Diane, are you there? I'm here. I need you to keep her home. I need you to keep her close. I need you to lock the doors and not open them to anyone you don't know. I need you to tell the school this afternoon that she is not to be released to anyone but you. And I need you to do all of this without telling her why, because she is 15 and she is fragile, and we have just begun to talk again, and I do not want her last 7 years to come back like this. Do you hear me? I hear you. Diane. Yes, I am coming up there. I know you are. I am coming up there tonight. I know. Diane, I am sorry for all of it. For the marriage, for the divorce, for the things I said, for the things I should have said and didn't. I am sorry. There was a long silence. Roy, she said. Her voice was wet. I told her you didn't want her. I know. I did that. I did that for 7 years. I did it on purpose, because I was angry, because I wanted to win, because I thought if I could just make her hate you, then I wouldn't have to share her with you. And I did it and it worked, and the whole time you were sending those cards, and I was putting them in a box under the floor in the attic. And she found them. I don't know how, but she found them. Because that is what daughters do. Diane. And now there's a man coming for her. Because of you. Because of what you did. Which was a good thing. The thing you did in that diner. It was the kind of thing the man I married would have done. I had forgotten that man. And now he is coming for her because of it. Because the world is what it is. I am coming up there. I will be there by morning. He will not get to her. I know. I have a brother, a man in my club. His name is Bull Donovan. I am going to send him to you tonight. He is going to be in your driveway in 8 hours. Before I get there. He is the man I trust most in the world. He is going to keep her safe until I arrive. Will you let him in? Yes, you will, without asking me again. Yes, Roy, I will let him in. Diane. Yes, thank you. Roy. Yes. Come home. He held the phone in his hand. He did not know what to say. He did not need to say anything. He hung up. He stood in the shop. He looked at the clock. It was 3:59. He had a phone call to make to a 15-year-old girl in Oregon at 6 o'clock. He had 2 hours. He had 2 hours and 1,000 miles of road north, and a man named Derek Brennan somewhere in the city behind him, and a 7-year-old girl named Lily Brennan in a bulletproof room across town, and a daughter named Hannah Calhoun, whose face he had not seen in 7 years. He had 2 hours. He pulled his phone out and texted Bull, 3 words, "Get to Bend." Bull texted back inside of a minute. On my way. Roy walked out of the shop. He locked the door behind him. He swung a leg over the Road King. The engine caught on the first turn the way it always did. He did not ride home. He rode to the women's shelter first. He stood in the lobby with his hands in his pockets, and he asked through the glass if he could speak to Megan for 1 minute. The counselor looked at him for a long time, and then she pressed a button, and Megan came down to the lobby. He told her, briefly, just enough. He told her where he was going and why. He told her that Bull was driving north tonight. He told her that another brother, a man named Whip, would be parked across the street from the shelter from sundown until he came back. He told her he did not know how long he would be gone. Megan listened. When he was done, she put her hand on the glass between them. "Roy," she said, "go, get your daughter, bring her home." Lily was at her elbow by then. She had heard. She had her face pressed against the glass. "You're leaving," Lily said. "For a little while, not long. You promised. I am keeping every promise I made. I am going to get my other daughter, Peanut. She needs me, the same way you needed me 12 days ago." Lily looked at him for a long time. The pale green eyes did not move. "Okay," she said finally. "But you come back." "I come back. Promise. On my mother's grave." She nodded. She took her hand off the glass. He walked out into the parking lot. The sun was beginning to slide down behind the western edge of the valley. The light was the color of old brass. He swung onto the Road King. The road north was Interstate 5. It was 9 hours to Bend if he did not stop 12 if he was careful. He intended to be careful. He had 2 daughters now, and he could not afford to die between them. He fired the engine. He rolled out onto McHenry Avenue. He turned north. The needle on the speedometer climbed and steadied, and the wind off the Sierras pushed at his back like a hand, and Roy Calhoun rode away from the city he had buried himself in for 7 years, and he rode toward a daughter he had not held since she was 8 years old. He stopped once in Williams for gas and for coffee. He stood in the fluorescent light of a Chevron station and drank coffee that tasted like asphalt and looked at his phone. There was a text from Bull. 2 hours behind you. Driving the F250 with Whip and Pastor in the cab. 3 Mossbergs in the back. Diane has been told. She's waiting up. He texted back, "Thank you." Bull texted back, "That's what brothers do, Marine." He stood in the parking lot for a minute longer than he needed to. The night had come down. The interstate sounded like a river behind him, the rush of trucks and the long Doppler whine of cars heading north and south. He watched the cars come off the off-ramp into the gas station. He watched them pull up to pumps. He watched a family in a minivan unload a tired toddler, and a trucker climb down out of a rig and stretch his back, and a man in a baseball cap pull a gray sedan up to the diesel pump. A gray sedan. Roy did not turn his head. He kept his eyes on his coffee. He kept his body angled toward the Road King. He let his peripheral vision do the work the way he had been taught 15 years ago in a desert that did not look anything like this one. The sedan was a Honda, newer than the Toyota Derek had been driving 12 days ago. The driver was wearing a baseball cap and a windbreaker. The driver was not pumping diesel. The driver was looking at his phone with the engine running. Roy walked slowly to his bike. He swung a leg over. He started the engine. He pulled out of the Chevron station. He took the on-ramp to Interstate 5 northbound. He held the bike at 60 miles an hour. The gray Honda pulled out of the Chevron station 40 seconds later. It took the on-ramp. It settled at 60 miles an hour, 300 yards behind him. Roy keyed up his Bluetooth. He dialed Ray Holloway. Ray picked up on the second ring. "Calhoun, where are you?" "I'm on 5 just past Williams. I've got a tail, gray Honda, late model, solo driver and a ball cap. Pick me up at the Chevron." Plate. Roy gave it. He had read it as the car pulled out the way he had read the Toyota's plate 12 days ago without thinking about it. "Stand by." Ray said. He was gone for 90 seconds. He came back. Honda's a rental, out of Sacramento International, picked up at noon today. Renter is named Travis Carmody. The deputy you mentioned. The deputy I mentioned. He's driving for Brennan. He's driving for Brennan. Or with Brennan. Brennan could be in the back seat. I can't tell from here. Roy, listen. I'm calling CHP. They will pick him up north of you. You keep riding. You do not slow down. You do not engage. You do not look at him in your mirrors any more than you already have. Are we clear? We're clear. Roy, yeah. How far to Bend? 8 more hours. Bull. 2 hours behind me, south of where I am now. All right, stay on this call. Don't hang up. I'm putting you in my ear and I'm getting on the radio. The road unrolled in front of him. The white lines came up under the headlight and went past and were gone. He thought about the gray Honda. He thought about Travis Carmody, a man he had never met, a man whose face he did not know, who was 300 yards behind him with a man named Derek Brennan possibly beside him, and a list of grievances and a department database and God knew what else. He thought also about the fact that Brennan was on this road, which meant Brennan was not at the women's shelter, which meant Whip parked across the street with a phone and a thermos of coffee and a Mossberg under a blanket, was guarding a place that did not currently need guarding, which meant Roy himself was the bait, which meant Brennan had not picked Hannah as the target. Brennan had picked Roy. The post about Oregon, the leak about Hannah, all of it had been to draw him onto the road where he was alone, where he was visible, where he could be followed. It was a clean plan. It was the kind of plan a man with police training would draw up. Get the bodyguard out of the way, get him on a freeway in the dark alone, make him think his daughter is the target. Then, when he reaches the daughter and exhales when the bodies have moved to where they were drawn to move, take what you were really coming for, which was not Hannah, which was Lily. Ray, Roy said. He kept his voice steady. He kept his speed steady. Ray, listen to me. I'm here. This is a feint. He's not after Hannah. He doesn't care about Hannah. He's pulling me north so that he can go after Lily. There was a pause. Roy, we have eyes on the shelter. Whip is across the street. There are 2 unmarked cars on the block. Lily is safe. You sure? I'm sure. Then who is in that Honda behind me? That is the question, Marine. Ray, if Brennan is in that Honda, then he's making sure I don't double back. He's the herder. He's keeping me moving north, which means somebody else is the hunter, somebody he sent, somebody we don't know about. Ray was silent for a moment. Travis Carmody is in that Honda, Ray said. We confirmed it through the rental record and a still from a traffic cam in Sacramento, so the question is where Brennan himself is. You need to check the shelter right now, not in 5 minutes, right now. Calling Whip. The line went quiet. Roy rode. The Honda held its 300 yards. The exits ticked past. Maxwell, Willows, Orland, the northern half of the Sacramento Valley sliding past in the dark. Ray came back on. His voice was different. His voice was the voice of a cop who has just made a phone call he did not want to make. Roy, Whip says there's a man in a hooded sweatshirt who walked past the shelter 4 minutes ago. Walked past. Did not stop. Did not turn around. Just walked past. 5'11", maybe 6 foot. Build matches Brennan. Get them out. We're moving them now. Coleman is on his way to the shelter with 2 units. They'll take Megan and Lily to a secondary location. I will personally make sure your friend Whip stays out of any of this on paper. Calhoun, are you with me? I'm with you. Keep riding. Get to your daughter. Bull will meet you. The fight here is mine. Roy gripped the handlebars. He did not answer. He thought about a 7-year-old girl in a borrowed sweatshirt 3 sizes too big. He thought about a stuffed bear named Henry. He thought about a hand pressed against bulletproof glass. He thought also about what he had said to her in the parking lot of the women's shelter. "I come back. Promise. On my mother's grave." He kept riding north, but the part of him that was still a Marine, the part that had ridden through Helmand and Kandahar and a dozen places that had no English names, the part that had learned to read tales in his mirrors and posts on Facebook and the small geometry of a man who used to be a cop, that part of Roy Calhoun understood with the clean, cold certainty that had kept him alive in places that had killed lesser men, that Derek Brennan had not made the mistake of being predictable. There would be a second feint, and the question by then was no longer whether Roy Calhoun could outrun Derek Brennan. The question was whether Roy Calhoun riding north on Interstate 5 with a gray Honda behind him and a daughter ahead of him and another daughter behind him and his brothers, stretched between them all, could think faster than a man who had spent his whole career thinking 3 moves ahead of frightened women. That was the question. That was the part of the night that was just beginning. The miles unspooled under him. The dashed white lines of the interstate flickered past in their endless rhythm. The hours stretched. North of Red Bluff, the gray Honda dropped back. Roy watched it in his mirrors. It did not come off the road. It did not take an exit. It simply slowed by 10 miles an hour, and then by 20, and the 300 yards became 500 yards, and then 1,000, and then the Honda was a pair of small headlights diminishing in the dark, and then it was gone. "Ray," Roy said into the Bluetooth, "I lost him." "You didn't lose him. He let you go." "That's what I mean." CHP picked him up. They're going to stop him north of Redding on a routine traffic violation. They'll hold him as long as they can. It buys us time. He won't talk. He won't, but he doesn't have to. The bigger fish is Brennan, and Coleman just called from the shelter. "Tell me." They got Megan and Lily out the back. Brennan was on the corner. He saw the cars come around the front. He moved. He's in the wind. We don't have him yet, but he is not at the shelter, and Megan and Lily are in a vehicle headed to a location that I am not going to tell you over an open line. Whip. Whip is following the vehicle from a block back, quietly. He has a clean record and a CCW. He is on paper a private citizen escorting friends he was already planning to see. We are not going to make him a problem. All right? Roy, keep going. You have 800 miles between you and Hannah. Bull will catch up to you in the morning. Don't stop except for fuel. Don't talk to strangers. Don't be photographed. Do not engage. Just ride. Copy. Marine. Yeah, you're doing it right. The line went quiet. Roy rode through the rest of the night. The valley opened up and then closed down. He went past Shasta in the dark, and the mountain was a black absence against a black sky. He went past Eureka. He crossed the Oregon line at 3 in the morning. The temperature dropped. He pulled his collar up. He rode. He thought about a great many things on that road. He thought about his mother. He thought about his father. He thought about a boy of 14 on Highway 99, learning that the world is mostly indifferent and is sometimes worse than that. He thought about Hannah, the small bones of her shoulder under his hand, when she was a baby, the way she had laughed once at a duck on a pond when she was 3 years old, the way her hair had smelled when she had slept on his chest. He thought about Lily, the pale green eyes, the 7 words, the hand against the glass. He thought about the fact that he had spent 7 years believing that the worst thing that could happen to a man had already happened to him and that he had been wrong. The worst thing was not the losing. The worst thing was the not knowing week after week, year after year that the losing was undoable. The road climbed into the Cascades. The pines came up around him. He passed signs for Klamath Falls. He He passed signs for Crater Lake. He passed signs for Bend. At 6:23 in the morning, gray light coming up over the eastern ridge, Roy Calhoun pulled into a quiet residential street outside of Bend, Oregon, and he killed the Harley in front of a small blue house with a porch light still on and a Honda Civic in the driveway. The Civic was Diane's. The porch light had been on, he knew, all night. He swung off the bike. His back was a single piece of pain. He had been on the road for 14 hours. He stood in the driveway for a moment because he did not know if he could make himself walk up to the door. The door opened before he had to. Diane stood in it. She was 40 years old. He had not seen her since she had been 33. She had let her hair grow gray around the temples, and she had not dyed it. She was thinner than he remembered. She was wearing a sweater that was too big for her. Behind her in the hallway, he could see Bull Donovan sitting in a kitchen chair that had been pulled into the entryway, his hand on a coffee cup, his eyes already on Roy through the door. Roy walked up the path. He stopped at the bottom step. He looked at her. "Hi," he said. "Hi." They did not embrace. They did not touch. They looked at each other for a long moment, and 7 years of silence passed between them and was put down, not resolved, just put down, the way two old enemies set down their weapons before they speak. "She's still asleep," Diane said. "I didn't wake her. I thought you'd want to." "All right." Roy. "Yeah, come inside." He came inside. Bull stood up out of the chair. The two men shook hands. Bull's hand was the size of a catcher's mitt and warm. Bull did not say anything. Bull just nodded once and went out onto the porch with his coffee to give them the house. Diane led Roy down a short hallway. She stopped at a door painted pale yellow. There were small stickers on the door from when Hannah had been little. A purple horse, a rainbow, a glittery sun. She had peeled the edge of the rainbow up at some point and then pressed it back down. "Knock," Diane said. "She's a heavy sleeper, but she'll hear you." She walked away down the hallway. He heard her go into the kitchen. He heard her turn on the faucet. Roy stood in front of the yellow door. He raised his hand. He let it down. He raised it again. He knocked. "Yeah," said a voice from inside, sleepy, young. "Hannah," he said. "It's me." There was a long silence, then a sound, the covers moving, bare feet on the floor. The door opened. She was 15 years old. She was almost as tall as her mother. Her hair was the color his hair had been before it had gone gray. Her eyes were her mother's. She was wearing flannel pajama pants and a long-sleeve shirt with the name of a high school on it, and she had not had time to put on shoes, and she stood in her bare feet in the doorway of her bedroom, and she looked at him the way she had been looking at his photograph on her laptop screen for 12 days. Except now, it was not a photograph. It was the man. She did not say anything for a long time. Neither did he. Then she crossed the threshold. She walked the 2 steps it took to reach him, and she put her arms around him and she pressed her face into his chest, where the small star on his lapel said, Marine. And Roy Calhoun bent his head down over the head of his daughter, and he closed his eyes, and he wrapped both arms around her, and he did not cry, because crying was a small thing, and what he was feeling was not small. He just held her. Bull stayed on the porch. Diane stayed in the kitchen. The house was quiet. The morning light was coming through the windows in pale yellow bars. Somewhere outside, a robin was singing. After a long time, Hannah said against his chest, "Dad." "Yeah, Peanut." "You came." "I came." "You came." "I'll keep coming. Every time. For the rest of my life. Are you hearing me, Peanut? Every time." She nodded against him. She held on. He did not know how long they stood there. Eventually, Diane came down the hallway carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Roy over Hannah's shoulder. She handed the other to Hannah, who had to let go of him to take it, and who looked when she let go like a child unwilling to put down a toy she had only just been given. "Come on," Diane said. "Sit down, all of you. I'm making breakfast." They sat at her kitchen table. Bull came in from the porch. Diane made eggs and bacon and toast, and she made enough for an army, and she did not say much. Hannah sat next to Roy and ate her eggs and looked at him every few seconds the way a person looks at a thing they cannot quite believe is in front of them. Roy ate. He had not realized he was hungry. He had not eaten in 18 hours. Halfway through the meal, his phone buzzed in his vest. He pulled it out. It was Ray. He stood up from the table. He held up a finger to Hannah. "1 minute. I have to take this. I am not leaving." He went out onto the porch. He answered. "Calhoun." "Ray." "We got him." Roy did not say anything. "Brennan." He was in a parking garage 2 blocks from the shelter. We had eyes on it. He had a duffel bag. The bag had a handgun in it that he is not legally allowed to possess as a convicted felon, which he became technically when his felony charge from yesterday went on his record. He had zip ties. He had duct tape. He had a printed photograph of Megan taken from a distance with a long lens that he could not have obtained legally. He had her address from this morning, which means somebody fed it to him in the last 2 hours, which means we now have probable cause to look very hard at Travis Carmody and another deputy whose name I am not going to tell you yet. You arrested him. We arrested him. He resisted. He tried to draw the firearm. He was not successful. He is in custody. He is uninjured. He is not getting bail this time. The charges, Marine, are not the charges you saw last week. The charges this time are kidnapping, conspiracy, possession of a firearm by a felon, multiple counts of stalking. He is going away. I cannot tell you how long, but it will not be a number that lets him touch Lily before she's an adult. Roy was silent for a long time. He stood on the porch in the gray morning. He looked across the street at a maple tree that had not yet shed its leaves. "Megan," he said, "Lily, they are safe. They are in a safe house we use for protected witnesses. They will be there for 48 hours while we put a longer-term plan together. They will be told this morning that he is in custody. They will be told to call you. I expect Lily will be on your phone within the hour." Ray, "Yeah, thank you." Roy, "I did my job. You did yours. You did your job in a diner 12 days ago. That little girl walked across a room and picked you, and you didn't drop her. That is the whole thing. That is the whole story. Everything else, including me, is just the cleanup." Ray, "There's something else." "What?" "Travis Carmody, the other deputy, the whole thing with the department leak." "I'm on it." "I know you are. I'm not asking. I'm just saying, make it count." "I'll make it count, Marine." Roy hung up. He stood on the porch for another minute. Bull came out and stood beside him. He had heard the call through the door. "Brother," Bull said, "it's done. It's done. I owe you. I owe Whip. I owe everyone." "You don't owe nobody. We owed you. We've owed you for 15 years. You just gave us a reason to pay it." Roy looked at him. Bull was looking at the maple tree. There was a wetness in Bull's eye that Roy did not comment on. Bull had been a Marine too in a war earlier than Roy's, and the two of them had a thing between them that did not require talking about. Bull, "Yeah, bring the kids home with me, the girls. I want to take them home, both of them. Both of them. All of them. Diane too, if she'll come. Even just for a week. They should meet. They should know each other. And there's nothing for them up here now that there isn't down there." Bull nodded slowly. "All right, brother, we'll make it happen." The phone rang in Roy's hand. He looked at the screen. It said, "blocked," but he knew. He answered. "Peanut," he said. Lily's voice came through small and clear and alive. "Roy, he's gone. Officer Ray said he's gone for a really long time." "I know, Peanut, I know. Mom is crying." "That's okay. That's a good kind of crying. Are you with your other daughter?" "I'm with her right now. Can I talk to her?" Roy laughed. He could not help it. He turned and looked through the screen door at his daughter at the kitchen table, watching him through the window, her fork halfway to her mouth. "Hannah," he called. "Phone! There's somebody who wants to meet you." Hannah got up. She came to the door. He handed her the phone. He stood on the porch and he watched his 15-year-old daughter introduce herself to his 7-year-old not daughter. He watched Hannah's face go through every expression he had ever seen on a human face. He watched her laugh. He watched her cry. He watched her sit down on the porch step with the phone pressed to her ear and her elbows on her knees, and he watched her talk to a child she had never met for 45 minutes, and he watched the 7 years of the gray come off of her like a coat she was finally allowed to take off. When she handed the phone back to him, she said, "Dad, she is a good kid." "She is. I want to meet her in person." "You will. Today if you want. Bull and I are going to take you all home. All of us. You, me, your mom if she wants, Bull, the 4 of us in his truck. I'll ride down beside you. We can be in Modesto by tonight." She looked at him. There was a thing in her face that had not been there 10 minutes ago. Mom would say no. Let's ask her. "Hannah, look at me. Whatever she says, I am here from now on. This is not the only chance. There will be visits, holidays, summers, weekends, video calls, however we do it. But I would like, if I can, for you to be in California with me this week, with your sister." She looked at the phone in his hand. She looked through the door at her mother. "She's my sister," Hannah said. "If you want her to be, I want her to be. All right then, she's your sister." Hannah turned and walked into the kitchen. Roy followed. Diane was clearing the table. Diane looked up. Diane had a way of looking at her daughter that Roy had not seen in a long time, but that he remembered the way she had looked at her in the hospital the day she had been born. "Mom," Hannah said. "Yes, sweetheart. I want to go to California." Diane set down the plate she was holding. She wiped her hands on her jeans. She looked at Roy. She looked back at Hannah. "For how long?" she said. "A week, maybe 2. I want to meet Lily. I want to see where Dad lives. I want to come back to school after." Diane was quiet for a long time. Then she said very quietly, "Okay." Hannah's eyes filled. "You can," Diane said. "You should. You've been asking the wrong question for 7 years, and I've been giving you the wrong answer. Go. Find out who he is. Find out who you are with him. Come back to me when you're ready." Hannah crossed the kitchen. She hugged her mother. Diane closed her eyes and held her daughter and rocked very slightly on her heels, and Roy stood in the doorway and watched them, and he felt no triumph and no anger and no judgment. He felt only the steady ache of a man learning very late that the people he had spent a long time being angry at were people too, and that the things they had done were things they were going to have to live with, the same way he was going to have to live with his. Diane let her daughter go. She turned to Roy. "You bring her back," she said, "in one piece. You call me every night. You let me talk to her whenever I want." "Yes." And Roy, "Yes. Next year, I want to come down for Christmas. If she's still with you or wherever she is, I want to come down. I want us all to be in the same room, even if it's only for one day." He nodded. He did not trust himself to speak. "All right," he said. They left Bend at noon. Bull drove the F250. Hannah sat in the front seat next to him, her duffel bag at her feet, a sketchbook in her lap. Roy rode beside the truck on the Road King. They went south through the Cascades, down through Klamath Falls into California in the afternoon, down through the long sweep of the upper Sacramento Valley, down past Shasta and Red Bluff and Williams. By 6 in the evening, they were in Modesto. By 6:15, they were at the safe house Ray had moved Megan and Lily to. They had stopped once in Weed for gas and for sandwiches. Hannah had climbed out of the truck and walked over to where Roy was filling the bike, and she had stood next to him with her hands in her hoodie pockets and the wind blowing her hair across her face. "Dad," she had said, "I have a question, and I want a real answer." "All right, the vest. What about it?" "Mom said you wouldn't take it off for the custody hearing. She said the judge would have given you weekends at least if you had taken it off, and you wouldn't." He had stopped pumping gas. He had set the nozzle down. He had looked at her. "That's true." Why? He had thought about it. He had thought about how to give the answer that was honest and would not make him look like a man trying to win an argument with the dead version of himself. "Because I was angry," he had said. "Because I thought if I gave them what they wanted, I would lose something that was mine. Because I thought the vest was the thing that made me a person, and your mom and the lawyers were trying to take it off me, and I couldn't tell the difference between the leather and my own skin. I thought if I take it off, I'm not me anymore. And then I thought, if I'm not me, what good am I as a father?" He had paused. He had looked at the small star on his lapel. It was the wrong answer. I gave the wrong answer. I should have taken it off for the hearing and put it back on after. I should have gone home with my daughter. I should have known that the vest was just a piece of leather, and that the only thing in that courtroom that made me a man was the daughter sitting on the bench. Hannah had been quiet for a moment. "Are you going to take it off now?" she had said. "No. Why not now?" "Because now you've already met me in it, and because Lily ran to it, and because it's not the thing I am anymore. It's the thing I was when you found me again, and I want to keep it on when I'm with you as a reminder that I do not deserve a second chance and that I am being given one anyway." She had thought about that. She had looked at the leather, at the patches, at the 7 years of road dust worked into the seams. "Okay," she had said, "I get it." "You sure?" "I'm sure, Dad. I don't need you to be a different person. I never did. I just needed you to be a person who came back." She had walked back to the truck. Lily came out of the front door before the truck had stopped rolling. She ran across the yard barefoot. She ran the way she had run in the diner with no regard for anything else in the world, and she leaped into Roy's arms before he had taken his second step away from the bike, and she clung to him with her face buried in his vest, and she said nothing for a long minute because she did not need to. Then she let him go. She turned. She looked at Hannah, who had stepped down out of the truck cab and was standing in the gravel of the driveway with her hands in the pockets of her hoodie. The two girls looked at each other. "You're my sister," Lily said. It was a statement, not a question. Hannah crouched down. Her knees went into the gravel. She held her arms out. Lily walked into them. She put her head on Hannah's shoulder. Hannah closed her arms around her. Roy stood beside his bike and watched his two daughters meet each other for the first time. He did not move. He did not speak. He felt something turn over in his chest, the way a stone turns over in a creek bed when the spring runoff finally comes through. Bull behind him in the truck rolled down the window. "Roy," he said. "Yeah, you all right?" "I'm all right." "That look on your face. I haven't seen that on you in 15 years. It's been a while." "Welcome back, brother." They had dinner that night at Megan's apartment, which was being moved out of since none of them were going back there. The new arrangement still being worked out would have Megan and Lily in a rental 3 blocks from the women's shelter for the rest of the winter. The shelter director was the one paying the deposit. Marcus, the high school teacher, Megan had been seeing very carefully and very quietly for 3 months, was helping with the move. He was a tall, soft-spoken man who Roy had met for the first time that afternoon and who had shaken his hand and said very seriously, "Thank you for what you did for them. I know what it took." Roy had liked him. Roy had liked him because he had not tried to be anyone he was not. He had not tried to be a tough guy. He had not tried to compete. He had just stood next to Megan and put his hand at her elbow and looked at Lily the way a man looks at a child he intends one day to deserve. The dinner was take-out pizza on paper plates. Hannah sat on the carpet with Lily. The two of them by the end of the night were drawing horses together in Lily's coloring book. Hannah was a much better artist than Roy had remembered. She drew a horse with a leather vest on. Lily laughed for the first time in 3 weeks. Megan caught Roy's eye across the room, and she did not say anything, but she did not have to. 5 years later, in the spring of 2030, Roy Calhoun sat in the second row of the auditorium at Modesto Junior High School. He was 46 years old now. There was more gray in his beard. He had cleaned his vest and pressed it, and the small star that said Marine was still in its place. Beside him sat Hannah, 20 years old, a junior at UC Davis, majoring in criminal justice. On his other side sat Diane, who had moved to Modesto 2 years ago and now lived in a small house 6 blocks from Roy's, and who had not remarried, and who had become slowly and carefully his friend. Beside Diane sat Megan and Marcus, who had married the previous summer. In the row behind them sat Bull Donovan and Tiny and Whip and Pastor and Garrett and Frank Mullen and Ray Holloway and Linda from Ruby's Diner, who had retired the year before and who had come because she would not have missed it. Those 5 years had not been simple. They had been the kind of years that look smooth from the outside and are on the inside the daily work of human beings learning very slowly to be near each other. Hannah had finished her last year of high school in Bend with Roy flying up once a month and Hannah coming south on every long weekend. Diane and Roy had not been friends in the beginning. They had been polite. They had been careful. They had been the kind of careful that 2 adults are who know that the child between them is watching everything they say. The friendship had come later. The friendship had come when Diane, in the summer after Hannah's graduation, had been diagnosed with a small lump in her left breast and had called Roy not because she had needed him to come, but because she had not known who else at that hour of the morning to call. The lump had turned out to be benign. The call had turned out to be something else. They had not been a couple in any way after that conversation, and they had not pretended to be. But the wall between them had come down. Lily had grown up in 2 houses. Most of her nights had been at Megan and Marcus's. Some of her weekends had been at Roy's. She had been by 12 the kind of child who could navigate the geography of a complicated family with the ease of a small career diplomat. She had called Roy on Sundays and Wednesdays. She had called Hannah on Tuesdays. She had taken her shoes off at every door she entered, and she had remembered of every adult in her life the one detail they had most needed her to remember. Derek Brennan had been sentenced in the spring of the year after the diner to 11 years in state prison. Travis Carmody had been quietly dismissed from the Stanislaus County Sheriff's Department within 6 months. Another deputy, a man named Russell, whose name had come up in Ray's investigation, had taken a plea deal that had cost him his pension. The wall, the one Frank Mullen and Bull and Ray had built around Megan and Lily, had held and had been quietly dismantled over time and had been replaced with the smaller and less visible wall of a normal life. On the stage, a girl walked to the microphone. She was 12 years old. She wore a navy blue dress and white sneakers and a small silver pin on her collar in the shape of a winged skull that the school had told her she could not wear on school property except on special occasions, and the school had decided that today qualified. Her hair was longer than it had been 5 years ago. Her eyes were the same pale green. "My name is Lily Brennan," she said. "I'm in the 7th grade here at Modesto Junior. I'm here today to give the keynote speech for the school's annual Hero Award Assembly. I was the one who picked the topic. I picked it last fall. I want to thank Principal Bradshaw for letting me. I think a lot of people thought I was going to talk about a soldier or a firefighter or a teacher. Those people are heroes too. But the person I'm going to talk about isn't any of those things. The person I'm going to talk about is a man in a leather vest." She looked up. She looked into the 2nd row. She found Roy's eyes and she smiled, and Roy Calhoun sitting between his daughter and his ex-wife, with the brothers of his life in the row behind him, did the thing he had not done in any of the rooms of his adult life, and he wept openly. "5 years ago," Lily said, "I was 7 years old. I was scared all the time. There was a man in my house who hurt my mom and yelled at me, and I had learned to read his footsteps and know which way to run. My mom was very brave. She got us out. She got a restraining order. But the system doesn't always work, and the man came back and he found us in a diner on a Thursday afternoon." She paused. She looked at her notes. She looked back up. "I want to tell you what I learned that day. I learned that a hero doesn't always look like what you think a hero looks like. The man I ran to was the scariest looking person in the room. He was the kind of man people cross the street to avoid. He had tattoos on his arms and a beard down to his chest and a vest with a skull on the back. If I had grown up watching the wrong kind of movies, I would have been afraid of him too." She smiled. "But I had grown up watching the right kind. My best friend in kindergarten had a dad who was a Marine. He used to come to our school on career day. He used to say the job of a Marine is to stand between people who can hurt you and you. I saw the small star on this man's vest, and I read it and it said, Marine. And I knew the way you know in dreams that he would stand between me and my dad." She paused. "And he did. He stood between me and my dad. He stood between my mom and my dad. He called the police. He called his brothers. He took us out of that diner alive. And he did not stop standing between us and the world for the next 5 years. He is still standing between us and the world. He is sitting right there in the 2nd row in the leather vest, and I want you all to look at him because I want you to know what a hero looks like. He looks like that." The room turned. Every face in the auditorium turned. Roy Calhoun in the 2nd row sat very still with tears running down his face and his daughter's hand in his, and he did not look away from the girl on the stage. "His name is Roy Calhoun," Lily said. "He has 2 daughters. One is named Hannah. The other one is named me. We aren't related by blood. We don't share a last name. He didn't make me, and he didn't raise me, and he isn't on any piece of paper my father. But he is my dad. Every kid who needs one knows what that word means and what it doesn't, and what makes the difference is not the paper. What makes the difference is the standing. He stood. He has not stopped standing." She stopped. The auditorium did not move. There were 800 people in the room, and they were all silent. "In conclusion," Lily said, and she smiled because she had been told to end any speech with the phrase "in conclusion," "I want to be a police officer when I grow up, like Officer Ray Holloway, who is also in the 2nd row, and who I have known since I was 7 years old. I want to be a person who stands between people. I want to be like my dad. Thank you." She picked up her papers. She walked off the stage. The auditorium broke into applause. The applause went on for a long time. Lily came down off the steps and she walked to the second row, and Roy stood up to meet her, and she crossed the last 3 feet at a run and threw her arms around his waist the way she had done in the diner 5 years ago, except now her face came up to the middle of his chest and not below his ribs. He bent down. He kissed the top of her head. "You did good, Peanut," he said. "Was it okay?" "It was perfect." "Hannah," Lily turned. "Did I do okay?" "You did amazing," Hannah said. She hugged her sister. Diane reached past her and touched Lily's cheek. Megan was crying behind her hands. Marcus had his arm around Megan's shoulders. That night after the assembly, they had a dinner at Roy's house. It was the same house he had bought after the divorce. It looked different now. There were pictures on the walls. There were 2 extra bedrooms with beds slept in and quilts that had been washed and were stained with use. There was a kitchen table with 8 chairs around it, and there were not enough chairs for all the people who came, and so Bull and Tiny sat on the couch and ate off their knees, and Frank Mullen leaned against the counter, and Ray Holloway sat on a folding chair he had brought from his car. Maggie, the pit bull, very old now, very gray, around the muzzle, slept under the table on a piece of carpet that Lily had insisted when she was 9 must be replaced with a softer one. They ate, they talked, they told the story of the diner, they told it again. Linda from Ruby's Diner told her version of it. Frank told his. Ray told his. At 9 o'clock, after the dishes were done, Roy stepped out onto his back porch with a cup of coffee. Bull came out after him, then Hannah, then Lily, then Diane. They stood on the porch in the cool spring night. The stars were out. The Sierra was a long, dark wall to the east. "Dad," Hannah said. "Yeah, Peanut. Mom told me something today. I wanted to ask you about it." "All right." "She said you go to Grandma's grave every Thursday." "I do." "She said you used to go alone." "I did. Could I come this week?" Roy did not answer for a moment. He looked out at the stars. "Could we come?" Lily said. "Hannah and me, both of us." He looked at his daughters, the 20-year-old and the 12-year-old, the one made of blood and the one made of choice, the one he had lost for 7 years and the one he had found in 7 minutes. "Yes," he said, I'd like that very much." "Could I bring the marigolds?" Lily said. "You could bring the marigolds." Diane was watching them. She did not say anything. She had her arms wrapped around herself in the cool night, and there was a small wet shine to her eyes that the porch light caught. "Roy," Bull said, quietly, so only Roy could hear him. "Yeah, the second grave." "What about it? You still got it up there in your head." Roy thought about it. He thought about Thursdays. He thought about marigolds. He thought about a phantom memorial he had built for a daughter who was still alive, and how he had carried it for 7 years, and how it had sat in his head like a stone in his belly. He thought also about his daughter standing next to him on his back porch in the spring of 2030, asking if she could come with him to her grandmother's grave on a Thursday afternoon. "No," Roy Calhoun said. "I tore it down." "When?" "5 years ago. In a diner." "In a diner." Bull nodded slowly. He looked up at the stars. "Brother," he said, "I'll see you Thursday." The wind off the Sierras came down through the valley the way it had come down on a Thursday in autumn 5 years before, and it moved across a back porch in Modesto, California, and it moved through the leaves of a maple tree in the front yard, and it moved on toward the cemetery up the road where a woman named Marlene Calhoun was buried under a granite stone, and where in 2 days a man in a leather vest would arrive with his 2 daughters and a handful of marigolds, and where for the first time in 15 years he would not have to kneel alone. Roy Calhoun went back into his house. He put his coffee cup in the sink. He turned off the lights in the kitchen one by one. He stood for a moment in the dark hallway of a house that was full of people he loved, and he listened to them, and he closed his eyes, and he thought of 7 words spoken by a small girl in a pink rain jacket on a Thursday afternoon in a diner in Modesto, California. "Please, sir, pretend you're my dad." He had not pretended. He had become. That Thursday, 3 days later, he rode out to Modesto Memorial Gardens with his 2 daughters. Hannah drove her own car up from Davis. Lily came in the F250 with Bull, who had agreed to wait at the gate. Roy rode the Road King the way he had ridden it every Thursday for 15 years, and he parked it in the same spot, and he walked the same path through the marigold beds to the granite stone with his mother's name on it. But this time he was not alone. Hannah and Lily walked behind him. Lily carried a paper-wrapped bouquet of fresh marigolds. Hannah carried a small folder of letters, and Roy did not ask what was in them, because he understood that there were some things his daughter needed to bring to her grandmother's grave that did not belong to anyone but her. They stopped at the headstone. Roy knelt. He laid his hand on the granite. He stayed like that for a moment. Then he looked up. He looked at Lily. "This is your Grandma Peanut. Her name was Marlene. She would have loved you." "Hello, Grandma," Lily said very quietly to the stone. She held out the marigolds. "I brought these. Dad said you liked them." "She did. Lay them right there." Lily laid them. She stepped back. She put her hand in Roy's. Hannah knelt down on Roy's other side. She set the folder on the grass. She opened it. Inside were 7 sheets of paper. She had written, Roy realized, a letter to her grandmother for every year she had not been able to know her. 7 years. 7 letters. "I want to read these to her," Hannah said, "if that's all right." "That's all right, Peanut." She read them. They were short. They were the letters of a girl who had grown up in the gray, written to a woman she had never met. They were funny in places. They were sad in others. There was nothing in them that asked for anything. They were mostly descriptions. Things that had happened in school. Things that had made her laugh. A trip she had taken with her mother to the Oregon coast when she was 11. A boy she had liked when she was 13. The day she had read the pink envelopes. When she got to the last letter, the one she had written that morning, she stopped. She looked at Roy. "Dad," she said, "could you read this one? I can't." He took the letter. He cleared his throat. He read it out loud to his mother while his 2 daughters held his hands on either side of him. The letter said, "Dear Grandma, I came to see you today. I am sorry it took me so long. My dad came back to me 5 years ago, and he has been bringing me back to you one step at a time every Thursday since. I am 20 years old. I am studying to be the kind of lawyer who helps children who do not have the kind of family I have now. I have a sister named Lily. She is not blood, but she is mine. Dad says you would have loved her. He says you would have loved all of us. I think you do. I think you have been here the whole time. Love, Hannah." Roy folded the letter. He set it on top of the marigolds. He stood up. His knees cracked. 46 years old, and his knees sounded like a porch step in winter. He took his daughter's hands. The 3 of them stood for a long time in the autumn sun, with the wind from the Sierras moving through their hair and the marigolds at their feet and the granite stone in front of them. After a while, Lily said, "Dad." "Yeah, Peanut. Can we come every Thursday?" "If you want." "I want." "Hannah." "Yes," Hannah said. "Me too, when I can. I have classes on Thursdays, but when I can." "Then it's settled," Roy said. They walked back through the marigold beds together. At the gate, Bull was waiting in the F250 with the windows rolled down and a thermos of coffee on the dashboard. He saw them coming. He got out of the truck and stood beside it. He did not say anything as they walked up. He just stood there with his hands in his jacket pockets, watching a Marine he had known for 15 years walk out of a cemetery with 2 daughters, and there was a quietness on his face that Roy understood, because Bull was a man who had been waiting 15 years for this particular Thursday. "Brother," Bull said. "Brother, that's a good morning." "It is. Where to?" Roy looked at his daughters. Lily was still holding his hand. Hannah was holding her sister's other hand. The 3 of them were a chain that had not existed 5 years ago. "Ruby's," Roy said. "I have a Thursday booth there. I haven't sat in it in a while. I'd like the girls to see it." Bull smiled. He nodded. "Lead the way, Marine." They drove the 2 miles to Ruby's Diner. The red neon Ruby's sign still had the burned-out U. There was a new waitress at the counter, a young woman named Becky, but Linda had come in on her day off to be there. She knew they were coming. Roy had texted her. They sat at the back corner booth, the same one, back to the wall. Lily on one side of Roy, Hannah on the other, Bull across from them with his arm along the back of the bench. Linda brought them coffee. She brought Lily a hot chocolate with extra whipped cream. "On the house," Linda said, "for old times." Lily looked around the diner. At the booth by the window, where the truckers had been arguing over a map. At the door, with its bell. At the spot 3 booths away, where her own 7-year-old self had eaten pancakes and waited for a man to walk through the door and take her away. She looked at her hot chocolate. She looked at Roy. "Dad, yeah, is this where it happened?" "This is where it happened." She looked at the table. She traced a knot in the wood with her finger. "I don't remember it as clearly as I used to," she said. "I think that's good. I think it means I'm okay." "It means you're okay, Peanut." "Hannah, yes. You weren't here." "I wasn't here." "But you came." "I came." Lily nodded slowly. She picked up her hot chocolate. She took a sip. She looked for a moment like a much older child. She looked like a child who had decided in the course of a single morning that she was going to be all right for the rest of her life. "Dad," she said. "Yeah, Peanut." "Can I tell you something?" "You can tell me anything." She set down her hot chocolate. She looked up at him. The pale green eyes were the same eyes that had looked up at him from across this same table on a Thursday afternoon 5 years ago, when she had been 7 years old, and had said, "Please, sir, pretend you're my dad." "I knew," she said. "When I picked you, I knew you would." "Knew I would what?" "Pretend." He laughed. He could not help it. He pulled her against his side. Hannah was laughing too. Bull was looking out the window with a smile on his face that he did not let people see often. "Peanut," Roy said. "I wasn't pretending." "I know." "You did know." "I knew." He held her. Hannah leaned against his other shoulder. The autumn sun came in through the diner window at the same slant it had come in 5 years before. Linda, the waitress, walked by the table and refilled their coffee and did not say anything because she did not need to. Outside the diner in the parking lot, the Road King sat in the same spot. The chrome on the handlebars caught the light. The leather of the seat was worn into the shape of a man who had ridden it through a great many Thursdays. Roy Calhoun, 46 years old, sat in a corner booth at Ruby's Diner in Modesto, California, with his 2 daughters under his arms and a brother across from him, and a Thursday afternoon stretching out ahead of him with no cemetery to kneel at and no grave to build in his head. And he thought about a 14-year-old boy on Highway 99 in the summer of 1997. And he thought about a young Marine in a tent outside Helmand Province. And he thought about a man in a leather vest who had walked into this same diner on a Thursday 5 years ago and had ordered the meatloaf special and had not known then that he was about to be saved by a child in a pink rain jacket who had grown up to be the bravest person he had ever known. The bell above the door of Ruby's Diner chimed. A family came in. A mother, a father, 2 small children. They looked around for a booth. They found one. They sat. The little boy, who was maybe 4, looked across the room at the big man with the gray beard and the leather vest sitting between 2 girls, and he did not look away. He stared. Children stared at Roy sometimes. He had gotten used to it over the years. Roy looked back at the boy. He raised his hand. He gave the boy a small wave. The boy waved back. The boy smiled. Lily looked up at Roy. She had seen the exchange. "Dad," she said, "I think he's going to be okay." "I think he is. Because you waved." "Because I waved." She put her head against his shoulder. The autumn sun moved across the table. The clock on the wall behind the counter said it was 3:47 in the afternoon. Same time, same place, different man. Same man, really, just finally healed. The wind from the Sierras pushed at the windows. The sign outside hummed. The red letters spelled rubies with the U burned out the way it had been for as long as anyone could remember. And inside, in the back corner booth, 3 people who had not all known each other 5 years ago sat with their hands touching and their coffees going cold, and they did not say anything more for a long while because there was nothing more that needed to be said. A man had walked into a diner one Thursday afternoon, and a small girl had asked him to pretend, and he had not pretended, and he had not stopped not pretending for the rest of his life. That was the story. That was the whole story. That was every bit of it.